welcome to The Word Now. This is Pastor Mark Goody. I'm glad to be with you tonight, and we will be starting session number 46 today as we continue on in our focus on eschatology, the study of end times events. Just to refresh ourselves as to the chronology of where we are. So we had the church age, then we had the rapture, then we had the rise of the Antichrist, and now I want to talk about a significant event which is very much connected to the Antichrist. In fact, it's the first, in terms of the scripture, the first major diplomatic event that he will be involved in, as far as we know. And it's actually orchestrating and establishing a Middle East peace. And it's interesting because this issue, the peace in the Middle East, peace between Israel and her enemies, notably the Palestinian people and Arabic nations, has been the scourge of mankind for millennia. We've all looked at the conflicts and the struggles, and maybe some people have wondered why such a seemingly insignificant area of land is the center of such continued struggle and activity. Well, I'll answer that today. So we will call this, we'll call it, is there going to be a covenant? Is there really going to be a covenant? We can also call it covenant and temple. And really I want to talk about this event that the Antichrist will engage in, the signing of a Middle East covenant, and what it means in the scripture. Okay, before we do that, let's just have a little bit of background concerning Israel. Now, obviously, we could say much about Israel, and I'm only going to say a few short sentences. But Israel is very central to the plan and purpose of God. It's central because way back, even in the inception of Israel, even with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the 12 tribes, even there were promises given which are relevant right up to the end and end times events. So Israel has always been on God's agenda and as the focus of his operation. Now, in Revelation chapter 12, we have actually a little picture of Israel. I want to read a little bit about that. It speaks about Revelation chapter 12, a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with a child, cried out, travailing in birth, till it was delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And then we can read on there in Revelation chapter 12. But the point is, this is a picture of the kingdom struggle against the nation of Israel and the people of Israel, because they brought forth the Messiah. First, the struggle was to stop them bringing forth the Messiah. Secondly, the struggle is to stop them being recipients of the promises of God, notably at the end. And it's interesting to note that those promises involve an exaltation of those people, and that is something that absolutely the devil doesn't want. So the enemy, the devil, has always wanted to destroy God's people so that they can't receive those promises. Of course, this has been very clear as we consider the actions of people like Adolf Hitler in the Second World War and so many more. The enemy has always tried to control the land, and that's important for the devil because obviously he knows that Jesus Christ will return at this geographical location. And the devil wants to be there, and when the devil wants to set up his allies to challenge the coming Christ, which in some ways sounds ridiculous, but That's his plan. So the devil is always concerned with the land and the people of Israel. And then thirdly, of course, the devil wants to destroy. So he wants to destroy the people, he wants to destroy the land, and he also wants to destroy the promises, because if he can disannul the promises made to Israel, notably the land promises in Genesis 12 and 15 and 17 and all those passages, then he can ultimately say to God, look, you're a liar. You made these promises and you didn't fulfill them. And this has always been the devil's agenda, to attack the character, the nature, and particularly the integrity of God. Because if the devil can prove the integrity of God as being false and as being evil, and then he can lift himself up as the good authority. And really, this is what he wants. He wants to disannul God and his authority so that he can lift himself up. All right, so the background concerns Israel. So as we consider this subject today, which really is focusing in on this future event of the Middle East covenant, we must understand that it's part of Satan's agenda and strategy to get him into that land and to give him control of those people and of that land so that he can be there, and physically there, meaning physically with raising up people to represent him when Christ comes in the Parousia. Because Jesus Christ will come and will physically stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in that land. All right, so maybe I should just read the main passage. This is a very important eschatological passage. Daniel chapter 9. We can read from, well, we've read 23, 24. Okay, let's read from 26. Daniel 9:26. We've already spoken about the 70 weeks. So let's go on from here. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. So Christ was cut off on the cross, but not for himself, for the redemption of mankind. And the people of the prince shall come, that shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And the he there we understand as being this person of the Antichrist, this person that will arise in the end times. The he is that the Antichrist will arise. This is shortly after the rapture of the church. The Antichrist will present himself on the global scene, and within probably months, a short period of time, it says, if this is the Antichrist, and most conservative scholars consider it to be the Antichrist, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So that covenant is a Middle East peace accord, or a covenant, or a Middle East peace accord. And this is something that many have tried to bring into being, from Kissinger to all the American presidents, to Obama, to Donald Trump. All of them have tried to bring this Middle East peace, and all of them have failed. The one that will secure the Middle East peace accord is the Antichrist. That's what it says. For 1 week, so the covenant will be for 7 years, and in the middle of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So if there's a sacrifice, we know that there's a temple as well, and we'll consider that. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate even unto the consummation. So it's a very unusual passage, but the main feature is the covenant. So I want to talk about the covenant. So basically, this is a covenant between Israel and her enemies. So who are her enemies? Well, notably the Palestinian authorities. But if we want to really expand that in truth, we could say that many of the Islamic and Arabic nations are well the enemies of Israel, including Iran, who has a complete aspiration to destroy Israel, and many of her allies as well. So the Bible's saying that all that group of Arabic nations will enter into a peace deal with Israel so that there's actually peace in the Middle East. And this is hard for us to understand, but this is what it's saying. Now, I put it to you, I suggest, well, it's clear that the Antichrist will be the one orchestrating this peace agreement. He will be the thrust of it. He will be the diplomatic representative. I suggest also that he will be backed up by a great authority, an external third party, and I believe that will be the European authority, something coming out of the EU. So an expansion of the EU or NATO within the EU, because ultimately that peace agreement needs an external force and an external authority to ratify it, to say, look, if the parties involved break the agreement, we will act. So basically that system, the fourth kingdom, not the fourth kingdom, but the European entity, will act as guarantors for the covenant. This is my suggestion, and it does fit well with the scenario of the Bible. So it's my suggestion here. Of course, the Antichrist is part of that fourth kingdom. He very possibly will be a Muslim, but he will represent those Arabic people, and they're all an extension of the Ottoman Empire, whose aspiration is to overcome Israel, whose religion is Islamic, and who are tied together by language and custom and an Arabic identity. So it's all the re-emergence of the Ottoman Empire, which was destroyed in 1923-24. And he will be part of that, and he will represent it. I suggest that the peace agreement will involve 10 particular Arabic nations. Maybe these will be the 10 toes. These are my suggestions, that maybe there will be 10 Arabic nations joining together, and they will form one side of this peace agreement, and the other side will be the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. Okay? We understand that the agreement following the agreement, the Jews will be able to build their temple. Now, let's just mention this now. There is no temple for sacrifices in Israel today, and this is a travesty. This is terrible for the people of Israel. Now, we must understand most of the Jews today, many of them are just secular people. They're more focused in business than they are in Yahweh and in the operation of a temple. But there's a great sway, the Orthodox Jewish community, who are aching to have the temple built. This is the third temple. This is the third temple. To have a temple where they can again bring sacrifices to Yahweh. This is so much on the agenda of the Orthodox Jewish community, and it seems that because of one ramification, one result of this covenant is that this aspiration will be fulfilled. They will be able to build their Jewish temple. So why is the Jewish temple so important to this group of Orthodox Jews? Well, number one, it's the center of their religious life. They gauge everything to do with the temple, to do with their future, their identity, their relationship with Yahweh. Everything centers on that temple. So imagine they have no temple now. They have no sacrifices now. They are completely destroyed now without this third temple. So it will be a center of religious life for these people, the Orthodox Jewish community. It will be a place of sacrifices. Again, they've had no sacrifices. We look back at the Old Testament from the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 16 to the doves and the sheep and the oxen and the multitude of sacrifices that were involved in repairing and establishing a correct relationship with Yahweh. Now, they haven't got that now. And they're aching, and they're aware that their relationship with Yahweh is broken. So this temple will be that place where those sacrifices can resume. It's vital in their relationship to Yahweh. it establishes the blessing of Yahweh. When the temple is in operation and the sacrifices are being performed and the priesthood is under operation, then that Jewish community can be assured that the blessing of Yahweh will fall upon them again. Even today, and I won't go into detail, you can look at all of this in my book, Apocalypsis. I encourage you to buy it again. But, there are entities within Israel, notably the Temple Foundation and others, who've been working for the last 100 years to get everything ready for this temple, and everything is in place. The utensils, the priesthood, they're even training priests now. The gold and the silver utensils, they have the sacrifices ready, including notably the red heifer, which was hard to establish, but they now have a red heifer that's ready for their sacrifices. They have the priesthood, the priests being trained in the priesthood, the garments. Everything is ready for the building of this temple. Everything. The temple foundation has done it all. And now they're just waiting for this man to step on the scene. And as I've said earlier, my scenario is that when this political leader arrives, there'll be a Jewish voice, an Orthodox rabbi, who will say, this is the one sent from God. This is the one that wants us to establish our temple and to have peace and to bring in the golden age of Israel. And he will be the false prophet who will really promote Antichrist so that the Jewish community embraces him as their Messiah. Can you imagine? Jesus Christ was rejected in John 5:44 and John 8:44 as Messiah because he was the carpenter of Israel. And now this Antichrist will come with all of his charisma and humanitarian thrust, and they will embrace him and they will say, he's the one from God, the Messiah for the Jews. Amazing. So let me just reiterate, we're running out of time here. The interesting thing is, it says in the book of Jeremiah that the peace agreement will be so successful that Israel will represent a place of unwalled villages. In other words, all of those security arrangements that were needed to bring security in Israel, their armies, their soldiers on the streets, they'll all be gone because there will be peace. And for sure, for the first 3.5 years of that 7-year covenant, there will be peace. It calls Israel a place of unwalled villages, meaning it doesn't need security measures because there's peace now. There won't be bombings. There won't be Palestinian terrorism. And part of that covenant will be that, Israel and their leaders will give away some of the land. That will be part of the agreement. They'll give away some of the geographical land of Israel. And of course, it's not theirs to give away. That land belongs to God. And he gave it to Israel to fulfill their future promises. So they will be completely wrong in giving away that land. But that will be their part in the covenant. There will be peace. It will be brokered. It will be, the guarantor will be an external military force, probably that European entity coming out of the European Union. So that if either party breaks the covenant, the Arabic nations, the conglomerate of possibly 10 nations, or Israel, and then that external authority, the guarantors, will be able to act and flood the Middle East with soldiers to re-establish peace if the covenant is broken. So for the first 3.5 years, there will be peace. And that will be the Middle East peace that the world has been yearning for. And then, as we're going to see next time, I think, in the middle of that 7-year period, something happens that causes the Antichrist to go into the temple, to defile the temple in some way, to make it unacceptable and unusable. And then all hell will break loose, and there will be soldiers again in Israel, and there'll be conflicts, and there'll be, political drama. And also as the nations surround and begin to get ready to, attack Israel. And this is leading to the second half of the Great Tribulation. And we'll be talking about that in detail later. So let's just reiterate, covenant and temple. There'll be one of the first diplomatic operations of the Antichrist will be to sign a Middle East peace covenant in Daniel 9, 25, 27, 28, 29. That covenant will bring peace within the borders of Israel. That will be a real peace, at least for 3.5 years. They will build their temple and it will be in operation. That peace will be ratified, it seems, by an external authority, which would probably be the European entity. And in the middle of that 7-year period, peace will be broken, and that will give rise to other events, which we'll talk about. All right, covenant and temple. This was session 46. I hope I didn't lose you. So I'm going to finish here and just say, wish the blessing of Yahweh be upon you, okay? Maybe the blessing of our God, our merciful, kind God that has everything. He is the God of history. He's the God of the present and of the future. And he will be there every step of the way. And his purposes will stand. And even though he allows evil to have its day, it's only that in the end it will accomplish the widespread purposes of God. And maybe God hasn't even told us what those entire purposes are, but they will be accomplished. And God will come out, of course, victorious. And those that have turned to him in humility will be part of his kingdom and be with him forevermore. Okay, God bless you. This is Pastor Mark Goody saying goodbye. Thank you.